Over this past week, we have seen countless stories in the news of rampant injustice among us, of trials, of tribulations, of stories of iniquity and hardship. I think we can all say that this is not the world we wish we lived in, that we imagine a better world where injustice isn't allowed to fester and breed and grow, where systems of governance don't enable injustices to continue. Before we enter into Shabbat, I want to ask that we each take a moment now to acknowledge the world that we live in its imperfections, but at the same time to dream of a world as it could be, one where the divine spark within each of us is respected and cherished and taken care of, a world where we fight a sacred fight to keep everyone safe and free from harm and protected. In the 24 hours that is Shabbat, let us imagine that we live in that world and truly taste what that world may be. So when Havdalah comes and Shabbat is lifted, and we feel the absence of that perfect world, that it gives us the courage and the strength and the conviction to help make that world a reality. So take a moment now to do what you need to do so that we can enter into this Shabbat together and work for that sacred peace for all.
Shabbat Shalom. My name is Ina Horn, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to Anshe Emeth Memorial Temple. It's so nice to see so many of you here in the sanctuary, and to all of you online, thank you for joining us. Daylight savings time has ended, and it gets dark so early now. We all know how much light affects the way we feel, so tonight, as it gets darker outside, let us bring the light to Shabbat with our singing and our spirit. And we'll begin that as we invite Carl and Sandy Feller up to the bima to light the Shabbat candles and lead us in the blessings that may be found on pages 2 and 3 in your prayer book. Shabbat Shalom.
As these Shabbat candles give light to all who behold them, so may we, by our lives, give light to all who behold us. As their brightness reminds us of the generations of Israel who have kindled light, so may we, in our own day, be among those who kindle light. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kishanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lechadlik ner shel Shabbat. Blessed are you, Adonai our God, sovereign of the universe, who hallows us with mitzvot, commanding us to kindle the light of Shabbat.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lehadlik ner shel Shabbat.
We continue with Al-Chadodi on pages 20 and 21.
Yadadai, 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 Pnei Shabbat nekabelah, lechadodi likrat kala, yadadai, 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 Pnei Shabbat nekabelah, shamor vezachor bedibor echad, ishmi'anu el hameyuchad, Adonai echad, u'shemo echad, l'shem u'letiferet v'litehila, lechadodi likrat kala, yadadai, 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 Pnei Shabbat nekabelah, lechadodi likrat kala, yadadai, 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 Pnei Shabbat nekabelah, likrat Shabbat lechu v'nelcha, ki mekor ha'beracha, meirosh mikerem nesucha, sof ma'aseh b'machshavat tchila, lechadodi likrat kala, yadadai, 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 Pnei Shabbat nekabelah, lechadodi likrat kala, yadadai, 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 Pnei Shabbat nekabelah, mikdash melech ir melucha, umitzei mitoch hafecha, rav lach shevet me'emek habacha, vehu yachamol alaichem la, lechadodi likrat kala, yadadai, 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 Pnei Shabbat nekabelah, lechadodi likrat kala, yadadai, 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 Pnei Shabbat nekabelah, itnari me'afar kumi, livshi bigdei tif'artecha mi, al yad ben Yishai beit halachmi, korba el nafshi ge'ala, lechadodi likrat kala, yadadai, 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 פני שבת נקבלה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, ידדי, 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 פני שבת נקבלה. התעוררי, התעוררי, כי באורך ובאורי, אורי, אורי, שיר דברי, כבוד אדוני עלייך אמלה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה. לא תבושי ולא תקלמי, מה תשתוכחי ומה תהמי בך יחסו. עניי עמי ונבנתה עיר עתילה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה. והיו למשיסה שוסייך ורחקו, כה מבלייך יסיס עלייך אלוהייך, כמשוש חתן על כלה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה. ימין ושמאל תפרוצי ואת אדוני תעריצי על יד איש, בן פרצי ונשמחה ונגילה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה. לך דודי לקראת כלה,
We rise in either body or spirit.
Shalom ateret ba'la, gam besimcha uvetzolato kemudei, am segula. לך דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
We continue on page 26 with Chatzi Kaddish.
יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה.
Amen.
בעלמא דברך חירותי וימליך מלכותי, בחייכון וביומכון ובחיי כל בית ישראל. בעגלה בעגלה ובזמן קריב אמרו אמן. יהי שמי רבם לברך לעולם ולעלמי הלוויה. יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי דקודשה בריחו לעילה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה. נחתה ונחמתה, דמירן בעלמא ויאמרו Amen.
We rise in either body or spirit for the Baruch Hu on page 28. We continue together on the bottom of page 31. This is an hour of change. Within it we stand uncertain on the border of light. Shall we draw back or cross over? Where shall our hearts turn? Shall we draw back, my brother, my sister, or cross over? This is the hour of change, and within it we stand quietly on the border of light. What lies before us? Shall we draw back, my brother, my sister, or cross over? Baruch atah Adonai hama'ariv aravim.
אהבת עולם בית ישראל עמך אהבת תורה ומצוות חוקים ומשפטים אותנו למדת על כן אדוני אלוהינו בשוכבנו וקומנו נשיח בחוקיך ונשמח בדברי תורתך ובמצוותיך לעולם לעולם ועד כי הם חיינו ואורך ימינו ואורך ימינו ובהם נגן יומם ולילה יומם ולילה ואהבתך אל תסיר ממנו לעולמים ברוך אתה אדוני אוהב עמו ישראל ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך. והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך, ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשוכבך ובקומך, וקשרתם לאות על ידיך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך, למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותי, והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים, להיות לכם לאלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם. אדוני אלוהיכם, אמן.
אמת ואמונה כל זאת, וקיים עלינו כי הוא אדוני אלוהינו ואין זולתו, ואנחנו ישראל עמו. All this we hold to be true and trustworthy for us. You alone are our God, and we are Israel, your people. You are our sovereign and Savior, who delivers us from oppressors' hands and saves us from tyrants' fists. You work wonders without number, marvels beyond count. You gave us life and steady our footsteps. You performed miracles for us before Pharaoh, signs and wonders in the land of the Egyptians. You led your people Israel out from their midst to freedom for all time. When your children witnessed your dominance, they praised your name in gratitude, and they accepted your sovereignty. Moses, Miriam, and all Israel sang to you together, lifting their voices joyously.
Bye bye bim bim bye, yabba bye bye bim bam. Bye bye bim bim bye, yabba bye bye bim bam. Ay 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 ay, yabba bye bye bim bam. Ay 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 ay, yabba bye bye bim bam. Mi chamocha v'yalim Adonai, mi kamocha nedar b'kodesh, norat ilot osem velech, norat ilot osem velech. Yai bye bye bim bim bye, yabba bye bye bim bam. Yai bye bye bim bim bye, yabba bye bye bim bam. Ay 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 ay, yabba bye bye bim bam. Ay 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 ay, yabba bye bye bim bam. Malchutecha raol vanecha, bokei hayam lifnei Moshe uMiriam. Zeili anu ve'amru, Zeili anu ve'amru, Adonai yimloch leolam va'ed, Adonai yimloch leolam va'ed, Adonai yimloch leolam va'ed, Adonai yimloch leolam va'ed.
Give us a place to rest, Adonai our God. Bring us into shelter in the soft, long evening shadows of your truth. For with you are true protection and safety, and in your presence are acceptance and gentle love. Watch over us as we go forth. Prepare for us as we return. Spread over us your shelter of peace, over all we love, over our Jerusalem and yours.
Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu leshalom, leshalom. אבותינו ואמותינו, אלוהי אברהם, אלוהי יצחק, ואלוהי יעקב, אלוהי שרה, אלוהי רבקה, אלוהי רחל ואלוהי לאה, האל הגדול, הגיבור והנורא, אל עליון, גומל חסדים טובים וקונה הכל, וזוכר חסדי אבות ואימהות, ומביא גאולה לבני בניהם, למען שמו באהבה, מלך חוזר ומושיע ומגן. ברוך אתה אדוני, מגן אברהם ועזרת שרה. אתה גיבור לעולם אדוני, מחיי הכל אתה רב להושיע. משיב הרוח ומוריד הגשם, מכלכל חיים בחסד, מחיי הכל ברחמים רבים. סומך נופלים ורופא חולים, ומתיר אסורים, ומקיים אמונתו לשני עפר. מי כמוך בעל גבורות, ומי דומה לך, מלך ממית ומחיה, ומצמיח ישועה, ונאמן אתה להחיות הכל. ברוך אתה אדוני, מחיי הכל. אתה קדוש ושמך קדוש, וקדושים בכל יום יהללוך סלה. ברוך אתה אדוני, האל הקדוש.
We continue the Amidah silently with either the words on the page or the words of our own hearts until we're ready to be seated or through page 63.
It is an enormous pleasure tonight to welcome Rabbi Mary Zamor to our congregation as this year's Rabbi Nathaniel Keller Memorial Lecture. Rabbi Zamor and I were talking earlier, and she had mentioned that this is her first time back in a synagogue in COVID world, giving a talk like this, and it dawned on me during services that this is actually our first time with a guest speaker at services during COVID. Last year for our Reitman Scholar and Rabbi Keller Memorial Lecture, we all did it through Zoom and through Skype, and there was nobody in the sanctuary but the cantor and myself and a smartboard with them zooming in from Florida and New York. So this is a Shechianu moment for us as well, and what a treat it is for all of us. Rabbi Zamor is a tremendous rabbi and scholar, editor of The Sacred Exchange, creating a Jewish money ethic, and Sacred Table, creating a Jewish food ethic. But I would think that the more important work, although not that that isn't important as well, is her work as the executive director of the Women's Rabbinic Network, which is a partner organization of the Reform Movement. For over 40 years, the WRN has worked to narrow the wage gap, create safer, respectful Jewish communities, and promote equality for all. Rabbi Zamor is the co-leader as well of the Reform Pay Equity Initiative and heads WRN's Clergy Safe Employees and Employers program, which focuses on harassment-free Jewish community. And as some of us know from reports this week, we have a vision of ourselves as what a Jewish community is, and then there's the reality. And the work that Rabbi Zamor does through the WRN and other avenues helps promote equity for all, and we are not immune from the wrongs of society as well. So I want to thank her for all the work she does to help promote equity for everyone. And it is a pleasure to welcome Rabbi Zamor up to the lectern. This is not only a first for us having a guest speaker, but we're also going to be taking our smartboards for a little test drive during sermon. So we'll see how that goes as well, which is why we're going to be heading off to the congregation.
So those of you who follow the headlines of the Jewish world, it has been quite a momentous week. And as you can imagine in my position, I've spent most of the week in meetings and in giving quotes to reporters. And so, there's been a series of articles that have come out, and I've glanced at them just to make sure I'm being quoted the right way. And I started to get emails from different people, messages. Where's your title? And I looked, and the JTA had dropped off the rabbi in my name. My title had disappeared. But what was interesting about those notes to me, they were angry. They were from other women who are rabbis, saying, not just where is your title, why are the sexual predators getting their titles and you're not? It's a very interesting thing. It was corrected as it went out to every single newspaper, really in Jewish newspaper in the world. But it's very telling. So as we discuss women in the rabbinate, and as we look forward in the journey to 50, on June 3rd, 2022, the end of this year, this Jewish fiscal year, we're going to be celebrating the 50th anniversary of Rabbi Sally Presand being ordained by Hebrew Union College. And what makes her ordination unique, and we'll talk a little bit about later, is that it was the first public ordination of a woman and therefore opened the door for the path to women in the rabbinate. But even as of a month ago, when you Google rabbi, an image, this is what you get. And if you do for the cantor, I'm sure you'll get the same. And of course, studies show that when all of us, most of us in our society, no matter what country in the world, no matter who your leaders are, when you ask people to draw a picture of a leader or to imagine a picture of a leader, or in our case, a rabbi, they're going to think of a man. Even women who lead feminist organizations or feminists to their core have implicit bias. I know, I've taken the test. So it's a problem. And when we think of women in the rabbinate, of course, you would think our story begins with Rabbi Presound, of course, our own hero from the state of New Jersey. But let's dig a little bit deeper. And of course, as we dig deep, we can even go back to Miriam. We can go back to Devorah. We can think of amazing female leaders in our sacred stories. But let's start a little bit further in history. Let's start with this woman. During the very beginning of the pandemic, Sigal Samuel released a book, a children's book, it's delightful, about Osnat Bazrani, who lived in 16th century Mosul, who was Kurdish. And if you go onto her publisher's website, you'll find this beautiful video of Sigal talking about what inspired her to take this tale that has been told orally from generation to generation in the Kurdish Jewish community about this amazing woman whose father was a great leader and a rabbi of a community and ran a yeshiva. And his daughter, Osnat, in fact, learned and later taught and did something that rabbis seem to do long, long ago. You see, it wasn't enough just to be able to engage people and teach people. You also had to do miracles and cure things. Rabbi Baisley, we would have had to get rid of plagues, in fact. So luckily, that's not on our CV these days. But she has all these miracles that are attributed to her. And while I would not say it's the true story of the world's first female rabbi, because that is not my picture of what ordination is, but she's notable and important, and it's important to know all of these stories. So let's meet another woman who's remarkable. And we're going to, again, jump way ahead. We're just glossing over literally centuries. And so I hope you'll take the occasion to look at the Jewish Women's Archive website, or you'll look at the Sacred Calling published by the CCR Press. These are all wonderful resources to really dig into these stories. But here, let me introduce you to Ray Frank. And you'll see the newspapers called her the first woman rabbi because, and she would never have referred to herself that way, by the way. She would have said that she was the first Jewish woman to preach formally from a pulpit in the United States, and she did so in 1890. But what's interesting about her, that she comes at a time period that is very important because she is, Seneca Falls Convention, for instance, was in 1848, and the Declaration of Sentiments and Resolutions included, quote, that men should stop monopolizing nearly all profitable professions and excluding women from medicine, law, and theology. So there was pressure already to open up the world to women. And for the most part, that was shaped in a way and framed in a way that women should leave the domain of the house and go out into the world and do things. And that's why during this time period, you see the rise of many auspicious legacy organizations as we know them today, like Hadassah, B'nai B'rith, and the Women of Reform Judaism. So that idea of women being leaders in their own right in these supporting role kind of organizations was really born out of this time period of seeing that women could be more than wives and mothers in their households. And in fact, Ray Frank taught, and then later she was a journalist. And while she was a journalist, she found herself going to out to Washington State and to Spokane. And when she got there, it was the high holidays. And there was a liberal group in town and there was an Orthodox group in town, and they weren't big enough on their own to do separate services, and they couldn't figure out how to do services together. See, nothing changes. And so she was quite appalled, and she basically said, no, we have to have services. And they were like, well, we have no one to preach. She said, I'll do it, because she had done a lot of Jewish education and loved Jewish study. And it was also an age of great orators. And when she got up to speak, she knocked their socks off. So much so, they said, please stay for Yom Kippur and do it again. And in fact, that's how she got this title, the girl rabbi of the Golden West. But the reality was, even though she's remembered in those headlines as being this great reformer and this woman who wanted to be a rabbi, she was against the suffragettes. She thought that women should not work outside the home once they were married. Of course, this was very convenient for her because she didn't get married, I think, till she was 40 or 41. But to a woman of her word, she never worked again. She never preached publicly. She only supported her husband's career after that day. So, alas, she was not really a rabbi. We're just going to keep cruising ahead and with Jewish history here and these remarkable women. And we're going to visit several different women now. So the first one we're going to meet in Cincinnati at Hebrew Union College. Martha Newmark was the daughter of one of the professors at the Reform Seminary in Cincinnati. And today you may know that Hebrew Union College Jewish Institute of Religion has 4 campuses, one in Jerusalem, one in New York, one in Cincinnati, and one in LA. But at this time in history, there was only one, and it was in Cincinnati. And so she was the daughter of an auspicious professor, and she had a great interest in learning Jewish things, and her father nurtured this interest. So much so that he had a side congregation in some resort community outside of Cincinnati, and in the summer, he put her up on the bima to lead part of services, which was greatly controversial in the congregation. Some people loved it, some people hated it. It was right after her bat mitzvah. And so she went on to study at Hebrew Union College and kept petitioning to be part of the rabbinical program. At that time, women could study there, but they could study to be religious school teachers and principals. And alas, she was never allowed to enter that program, even though she basically took every single class she could have, except for the last 2 that were reserved only for rabbinical students. So it never happened. And that was in 1921, by the way. But what is remarkable about that conversation is that the debate went to the faculty of Hebrew Union College, and to read those statements, they're really actually quite horrifying, because they talk about, alas, if you make women rabbis, if you ordain them, the entire congregation is going to become women. They were actually starting to opine at that time that too many women were filling the pews, and there was great fear that if you started to also ordain women, that it would just drive all the men out. So, and by the way, all of this is juxtaposed against the greater secular and religious history of America, that there are churches during this time period that are starting to ordain women. And so at that point, they threw the question to the Central Conference of American Rabbis. And at the 1921, maybe by then it was 1922, Cape May, back to New Jersey, conference, the rabbis debated it. And they did a very interesting thing. They invited their wives to come and offer their opinion. And at the end of that day, they voted, and the Central Conference of American Rabbis said that if women were ordained, they would accept them as members. But alas, the Board of Governors at Hebrew Union College nixed the idea and shut it down. So it did not come to be. But a few states over in New York on West 68th Street, Stephen Wise Free Synagogue, right next door, Rabbi Stephen Wise opened a place of a seminary, a place for study. It was not considered reform. It was just considered non-denominationally liberal. But in the founding of that, he said that both men and women should come and study there. He didn't say for what program, however. So during that time period, from 1922 on, we have 3 different women who pushed to enter the rabbinical program because the manifesto of the school was that women should be able to do that, to study. So the first 2, Irma Levy Lindheim and Dora Auschwitz, both of them were unusual because they weren't the typical model that we've seen in a lot of these women, that they had a father who was a great rabbinical kind of scholar, that since girlhood they had an interest and proclivity towards this, and then, wanted to continue with that route like any boy, teenager man would want to as they grew up. They were, in fact, well-to-do women with lots of kids and great influence in the world, and alas, neither of them made it. Helen Hadassah Leventhal is interesting because by 1930, she really, really wanted to be ordained by Jewish Institute of Religion. And again, unfortunately, she literally went through every single class except for like those last 2. And so much so that when they finally finished the debate after really stringing her along for years, in her case, they had to not only give her a master's degree, but a special certificate noting her extra study, but alas, not a rabbi. And what they all didn't know, that unfortunately, across the ocean in Germany, a woman named Regina Jonas was about to become the first woman ordained rabbi. And this history, we're going to start about why it's been hidden, because Regina Jonas's history was hidden until the fall of the wall in Berlin. Isn't that interesting? Her papers were hidden and archived, and this is why. So the time period in which she's ordained in 1935 in Germany. Just think of that, it's amazing. So she's one of these women who grew up as a girl, loving Hebrew school and loving learning Jewish things, and just wanted to be a rabbi. And so she went to the seminary where, again, women were allowed to study, but with the intent of becoming a religious school principal or teacher. And she kept asking them if she could become a rabbi. And so at that time, the head of the seminary in Germany, the liberal seminary in Germany, said that yes, it could be a strong possibility. And so they assigned her for her rabbinical thesis to write about why women should be able to become rabbis. And in fact, you can read it in translation in her biography. It's quite interesting. And so she did this work, and at the end of all that, unfortunately, the head of the school died, and the new head of the school said, no, I'm not going to ordain you. I know, it's sad, it's very sad. And so, of course, this is on the backdrop of growing anti-Semitism in Nazi Germany. And one of the professors ends up, who is the head of the rabbinical union, basically, the liberal rabbinical union, ordains her, but in private. Now, what's interesting is that when her papers that she hid with the Jewish community when she was unfortunately transported to Theresienstadt. When they found these papers, among them was a paper from Rabbi Leo Beck, not saying that she was a rabbi, but attesting to the fact that she was privately ordained by Max Diamant. So it's a little tricky. And during this time period that she is actually ordained and functioning out in the world, she ends up first teaching girls, just as if she were a Hebrew school teacher. But what happens, unfortunately, as the Nazis make unfortunate progress in their diabolical plans, a lot of the men leave with their families and flee, or are locked up or sent to camps. And there's a shortage of teachers and leaders. And so she kept getting more responsibilities in the community before she herself is transported to the camps. And so she ends up functioning as a rabbi, even though they refused to call her publicly rabbi. And in Theresienstadt, she does the most remarkable thing. She teaches, she preaches, she holds the community and holds them up. And she does this side by side with Rabbi Leo Beck and Viktor Frankl. And yet, when she's finally transported to Auschwitz and dies, they never speak of her after that. Her history is silenced for years and years and decades, until this archive comes out of Eastern Germany. And in 2014, a group from both Europe and America went. Many of the first of the women in the rabbinate went, and they put up a memorial in Theresienstadt in her memory. So now we're going to jump forward to a much happier story, to Sally Priesand. But what you'll find here is some very interesting, startling parallels to Rabbi Jonas's story, in that, again, Rabbi Priesand grows up just loving Jewish stuff and learning and wants to be a rabbi. And so her parents don't hold her back. And at this point in the 1960s, in the face of the baby boom, there's a shortage of rabbis. And Hebrew Union College, which since in 1950 has merged with Jewish Institute of Religion, opens a special program in conjunction with the University of Cincinnati, in which young people could go to college at the University of Cincinnati and in 4 years not only get their undergraduate degree, but have completed the first year of rabbinical school. And so she does this in 1964, and by 1968 enters the rabbinical program at Hebrew Union College. But what's interesting about this is most of the professors are just waiting for her to drop out. That's what they expect her to do. And you can find archival evidence of them basically saying, like, why is she still around? Why hasn't she just gotten married and dropped out? And to hear Rabbi Priesand talk about this is also really quite a treasure. So the head of the rabbinical school, Dr. Nelson Glick, he is the one who says she will be ordained. And unfortunately, he dies. And Dr. Alfred Gottschalk is the new president of Hebrew Union College Jewish Institute of Religion, and decides to hold up Dr. Glick's promise that Rabbi Priesand will be ordained. So a very different story, even though the same twists. And I'll just give you a little bit of the irony of this moment. And in fact, I spoke to Sally Priesand before my husband and I got into our car to drive here. I wanted to wish her Shabbat Shalom, and I wanted to recognize what a hard, hard week this is for the entire Reform movement, and especially for her. Because unfortunately, Dr. Gottschalk is one of the men who's been labeled appropriately so a sexual predator. And so to hold those two truths, that he took one of the most important steps for women in Judaism, and at the same time did irreparable harm to women in Judaism, is very hard to hold in one mind and one heart, and one community's communal mind and heart. And so she has been, even though she's known many of these stories, to see it in paper and in the headlines has been very hard, of course, for her and for all of us. But it is important to note his role in history as with hers. And so I'm not going to go through every single person on this list. They're in different colors because the blue ones come from the Jewish Women Archives timeline, and I've added a couple more. And as you look through, you can see all these beautiful firsts. And one of the images I like to bring to the idea that Rabbi Priesand was ordained in this public way, the way that Rabbi Jonas unfortunately wasn't, and that she was publicly recognized, and it meant that women in the rabbinical program would definitely be ordained after their 5 years of study, after 4 years of college, that it opened the door for other branches of Judaism, and importantly, very importantly, people of other beautiful identities. It was the idea of saying that the people in front of you on your bima can look like you, and you can have a voice in your community, whether it is as a rabbi, a cantor, an educator, or a lay leader, that we all have a place in this Jewish community and all its different beautiful branches. And so these two women, even though Sandy Sasso was in school, by the way, at the same time as Rabbi Sandy Sasso ended up being the first woman ordained at the Reconstructionist Rabbinical College, in today's known as Reconstructing Judaism. They changed their name a few years ago. But what I think is notable about Amy Alberg and Sarah Hurwitz is the first one belongs to the conservative movement, ordained in 1985. Rabbah Sarah was ordained in 2009. Those movements had to work through halachic issues. They had to work through the complications of Jewish law. And it did take the conservative movement, as you can see, many years to get there, and not surprising, the Orthodox even more. And today, their Yeshivat Maharat is really thriving. They ordain a small number of rabbis every year. And it is, of course, remarkable to see these women who I think are real rock star heroes. And of course, they are now walking a path that is extraordinarily difficult and reminds me of our own history. We're going to shift gears a little bit. So that is the history and how we got to Rabbi Presand. And as of today, hold it, I have to do the math. As of 2 days ago, there were 835 women ordained by Hebrew Union College in the Reform movement, internationally, including the Israel program. Yesterday, Thursday, 4 more women were ordained. And so that makes it 839. And so you would think that's the end of our story. All equal, everything's good, go home, right? Unfortunately not. And that's why I bring this text. And by the way, most people up to this year, and in fact until this week, have told me, it's all equal, go home. That has actually been pretty much the theme of the last 7 years of my being the executive director of the Women's Rabbinic Network, is people telling me it's over. My 600 plus members have never told me that, however. So here we go, Leviticus. We read this at the High Holidays. This is the center of the Holiness Code and the center of the Torah. It's important. Being fair, being just, having equality, having equity. And here, of course, we're talking about scales and measures, very technical things for the marketplace. But I bring this because, after all, isn't employment yet another type of, well, not quite a commodity, but, it's part of the marketplace. And so the reality is that when our scales and measures are not equal, as the Talmud tells us, as it teaches in this text, but here, in the case of one who uses false measures, there's no possibility of repentance because he has no way of knowing whom he cheated and therefore unable to return the stolen money. Well, I would say that when we don't pay women equally, when we don't give them the equal opportunities, when we don't treat them equally because they're subject to bias, to misogyny, and to harassment, the scales are not just. And so, unfortunately, our movement, our beloved movement, and I stand here as a person whose family, including our son, includes 5 generations in the Reform movement, a movement that I'm not going anywhere. This is my movement. I believe in it. I was raised on the mantra of Tikkun Olam, of egalitarianism, of social justice, and I believe it as much as all of you do. I know we can do better, because we haven't been doing it. And so 6 years ago at WRN, we started the Reform Pay Equity Initiative. And I started there in my work, frankly, because the things that came out this week, if I tried to tell everybody that 6 years ago, I would have been run out of town. So I decided to start with our pay and salaries and the wage gap because there was data behind it. And even though people still tried to tell me I was wrong, even though we were looking at spreadsheets with data, it was the easiest place to start. And so I've tried to educate our Reform community, not just about rabbis, about every employee and what it means to create a level playing field through job searches, negotiations, supervision, everything in employment, so that everybody of every beautiful identity is treated equally in our institutions, in our congregations. We just did a new study, so this data does not include our newest data, but unfortunately this is from, 3 years ago, and it is pretty much the same with some exceptions. So in the reform movement, if you look at executive directors, administrators, on average, there's a 15% penalty for being a woman. And please note, this is all quite binary, and I apologize for that, but that's where our data is right now. It's possible in a couple more years we'll have different, more nuanced data, but for now it's just male-female. 19%. Cantors, when you look through all those different stripes of, big congregations, small congregations, assistant cantor, senior cantor, you have a range from 14 to 29%, 29 being in the largest size congregations of this nation. Rabbis, the penalty for being a woman is between 4 and 13%. That translates like 4 cents for every dollar, And when you adjust across and aggregate the rabbinic data, you get 19 cents adjusted for title and size. That doesn't really sound horrific, perhaps. I don't know, it doesn't sound too good to me. But here's a nice illustration from the secular world of the wage gap when you look at it over a 40-year career for a woman. And this is based on about a 79 cents gap, so it's not too far off from the gaps we're talking about at the highest end. So Asian women have that's on average, but when you then break it down to different types of women and different types of identities, you see Asian women, white women, black women, Native women, and Latinas. Oh my God, right? It's horrific to look at. And I don't know about you, but if I could tell you you would have an extra, well, in my case, $500,000 when you retire, that would be kind of nice. So all those cents actually really add up. And part of our work, we also just launched in the late spring, early summer, a really thorough resource on family and medical leave, because again, this is one of the great disparities of the reform movement, and it is so important to give this to men and that men take it so it becomes normalized and it does not continue to be a women's issue. I'm just going to leave it at that. And then our work in safe space. 6 months ago, we launched this website so that members of our community could find any one of the three investigations going on. They're going on they have been going on for Hebrew Union College that just released the report this week. The Central Conference of American Rabbis are reviewing their ethic process and its impact. And the URJ is doing a thorough investigation too. Their investigation is still open. So if you or somebody you know has information, whether it's about them or someone else, they are invited to report. You can find the information on wrnresources.org, and we have many resources there to support people during this very traumatic and trying time. I'm going to leave you with two things. First, the technical, which I'm going to say now, and then a little bit of a nechemta, a little bit of a lift. So I leave every group that I speak to on this topic a little homework. So this is not specific to your congregation. This is just what I want every group I speak to think about sometime soon. Please make sure that the yortzeit of Rabbi Regina Jonas is part of your communal calendar. We mark it on Parshat Bereshit. That is, unfortunately, when she was brought to Auschwitz and died. Do a review of your pay of your employees with a pay equity lens. WRN has resources on that if you need them. Adopt a robust paid family and medical leave policy for all employees that is clearly communicated, so they don't have to ask about it. Again, the WRN resource is wonderful. You, by the way, can look at those resources and bring them into your secular work environment too. Adopt an ethics policy in your congregation that is to create safety and respect in your community with strong procedures in place. And the URJ has wonderful resources for that. This is my nechemta in everything I said. It's been a terrible, hard week. On the other hand, we have just witnessed truly the most historic, most transparent reckoning ever of any religious group. And it will become the benchmark of all investigations and discussions of safety and respect and equity in the future. We are the movement of egalitarianism, of tikkun olam, social justice, and those are the principles that are going to guide us to be a much safer place. And it is my hope that the pain we're feeling right now will lead to something very, very good for all. And I know that by being able to discuss it publicly with honesty is going to make that difference. Shabbat Shalom.
For our teachers and their students, and the students of the students, we ask for peace and loving kindness, and let us say Amen. And for those who study Torah here and everywhere, may they be blessed with all they need, and let us say Amen. We ask for peace and loving kindness, and let us say Amen. Amen. We ask for peace and loving kindness, and let us say Amen. We ask for peace and loving kindness, and let us say Amen. Amen. We ask for peace and loving kindness, and let us say Amen.
Shabbat Shalom once again. While I think all of us can agree that we wish that there was never a need for our seminary, our Reformed seminary, to need to do an investigation like this, and we wish we lived in a world where that wasn't a necessity, I could think of no better rabbi to come and speak to us following the release of the report than Rabbi Zamor, as you all witnessed, and how fortuitous that it was that the coincidence came out this week. And I know this has been a crazy week for you in general, so thank you so much for joining us tonight. A few announcements before we conclude our service. First of all, a thank you not only to Dave Schlossberg for the beautiful music tonight, but also to the Fantel family for the oneg that we'll have at the conclusion of our service. They're in to-go bags that are out in the hallway. The Fantels have put together a lovely oneg for us tonight in honor of Ray's bar mitzvah, which will be tomorrow morning. and we can't wait to get to this point in his journey. A very special boy, and if I start talking about his journey right now, I'm going to tear up, so I'm going to skip that. But thank you to his family. Just a few announcements. This is that busy time of season for us in terms of Tikkun Olam and events at the temple. So starting this Saturday with all of the events, or this Friday with all of our events, is our installation of Cantor Stanton, which we are finally doing after a year and a half. COVID has put a postponement on it to some degree, so we're thrilled that we get to finally install you and formally welcome you to our congregation this coming Friday. And there is a concert here in the sanctuary that will also be streamed. If you'd like to come and be a part of it, we'd love to have you. You can go online to buy tickets or to be a sponsor of the concert and the event. You can do that from the links in our temple emails going out, either for Shabbat this afternoon or in the weekly emails. Please come and join us for the concert. It's Michelle Citrin, and as you all know, she does one wonderful concert, so please come and join us. In addition, in terms of Tikkun Olam, we have our wishing wall up, which is downstairs by the back parking lot. Our wishing wall this year is accounting for 140 children in New Brunswick who are looking to us for their Christmas presents. And most of the time it's a lot of clothing which they need desperately. So please, on your way out, please pick one of the sheets of paper out of the wishing wall. It has directions on how to buy the gifts online so that we can have them sent here and sort them and give them out. This is, I think, from what I was told earlier today, one of our most ambitious years of 140 kids. What's that? 148. 148 kids. And we're up to that number because that number is a real necessity. So please help us bring some light to these kids this Christmas season. In addition to that Christmas season, Team B'tei Avon has agreed to make dinner for 300 individuals through Elijah's Promise this Christmas season, December 25th. But they need your help. In order for them to be able to make dinner for 300, they need a couple of things. The first is they need about 18 15-pound turkeys. You could bring it in early if it's frozen. If it's not frozen, please buy it no earlier than December 20th. But they need 18 15-pound turkeys. Volunteers and a sign-up genius will go out so people can sign up. It's pretty much going to be 2 days of constant cooking in order to do this. And they also need some funds to help cover the sides and some of the other dishes. So they're looking for about $1,000 in funding to do this. If we have excess given, I'm sure they won't mind that the excess will be going to the Elijah's Promise Lunch Fund. Since the beginning of the pandemic, our team has made over 35,000 lunches for the people of New Brunswick through Elijah's Promise. There's a lot of hunger and there's a lot of need. And as Elijah's Promise, our food bank and food shelter says, food changes lives, because when you're starving, it's really hard to find a job. So since the beginning of the pandemic, we have made over 35,000 lunches for the people of New Brunswick, and those funds are starting to dry up a little bit as well, and we'd love to keep making sandwiches. So please, if you can't volunteer to help with the 300 dinners for Elijah's Promise or buy one of the turkeys, please consider donating to the temple to cover the cost of that dinner, and once we have a surplus, that'll go to making more lunches for Elijah's Promise. All good works for this holiday season. At the conclusion of our service, we will be joining together with Kiddush Emotzi in our sanctuary so that people that are at home can join with us before we say Shabbat Shalom and head on out to get our own onegs that are out in the hallway. On this Shabbat Eve, as we join together as one congregation to celebrate creation and the joy of life and living, We turn our thoughts to those in our community for whom life has become precarious because of health or hospitalization. O God of healing, in our hearts we name those who are facing illness and pain. We join our prayers together with the prayers of those who love them. Give them renewed comfort and courage. Strengthen them the healing powers you place within us all, and guide the hands and hearts of those who are entrusted with their care. May the knowledge of your love and ours give added hope to them and their families. May they find even greater strength because our prayers are linked to theirs. Mishaberach avotenu v'imotenu hu yavarech et hacholim, refuat hanefesh u'refuat haguf, hashta'a b'ga'ala v'zman kariv v'nomar. Amen. May the one who blessed our ancestors bless those in need of healing. May God swiftly send them a complete renewal of body and spirit, as together we say, Amen.
Bless us with the power of your healing. Bless us with the power of your hope. May our hearts be filled with understanding and strengthened by the power of your love. Bless us with a vision for tomorrow. Help us to reach out to those in pain. May the warmth of friendship ease our sorrow. Give us courage, give us faith, show us the way. Mi sheberach avotenu, mi sheberach imotenu. Hear our prayer,
Hear our prayers,
hear our prayer,
hear our prayers.
hear our prayer, and bless us as well. Hear our prayer, hear our prayer, hear our prayer, hear our prayer, and bless us as
We continue now on page 282 as we rise in either body or spirit for Elenu.
עלינו לשבח לאדון הכל, לתת גדולה ליוצר בראשית, שלא עשנו כגויי הארצות, ולא שמנו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כהם, וגורלנו ככל המונם, ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים עודים. לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא.
Page 287. Together. May we gain wisdom in our lives, overflowing like a river with understanding, loved, each of us, for the peace we bring to others. May our deeds exceed our speech, and may we never lift up our hand but to conquer fear and doubt and despair. Rise up like the sun, O God, over all humanity. Cause light to go forth over all the lands between the seas, and light up the universe with the joy of wholeness, of freedom, and of peace.
ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד ושמו
Yesh kochavim shoram magia artsa. There are stars up above, so far away we only see their light long, long after the star itself is gone. And so it is with people that we loved. Their memories keep shining ever brightly, though their time with us is done. But the stars that light up the darkest night, these are the lights that guide us. As we live our days, these are the ways we remember. With hearts that ache and are saddened, we name now those whom death has recently taken from us, whose families are observing the Shloshim. We remember Bernard Levy, husband of Doris, father of Wendy and Sharon and Brian, grandfather of David and Lynn, Alan and Rachel, Todd and Michael and Heidi, Lori and Todd, and great-grandfather of Chris and Brianna, Louis and Sadie, Jordan and Claire, Jenna and Dana. We remember Lenny Struminger, wife of Jay of blessed memory, mother of Ronald and Marla, and Janine and Alex, grandmother to Jared and Phoebe, Sarah and Jonah, and Jessica. We remember Edith Bronstein Magaziner, mother of Robert and Cheryl, Jonathan and Hillary, Diane and Mark, and grandmother to Sarah and Allison, Noah and Mayan, Leah and Benjamin. And we remember Vivian Greenberg, sister of Carl and Pat, mother of Robert and Emmanuel, Jill and Jay, Bruce and Kim, Bill and Joyce, Sue and Alan, and Mike and Helene, and Andrea and Michael, grandmother of Sophia and Avery, Peter and Mark, Kaylee, Allison, Lauren, Amy, Elise, and Alex, Harrison, Sam, and Rachel. On this Shabbat, we also recall those dear ones who died at this season in years past, and whose names we record with love in our service booklet this evening. Their names are forever bound to our hearts and are permanently inscribed throughout our building. And if you are joining us tonight online to say Kaddish for a loved one, please either say their names aloud at home or type their names into the chat either on YouTube, Facebook, or on our temple streaming site so that we can all lift up the names of your loved ones together. And if you are here in the sanctuary to say Kaddish for a loved one, please say their names as I look out to you. Zichronam livracha. May all their names and memories only be for a blessing. I invite all the mourners, if able, to rise for Kadisha Tom, Mourner's Kaddish, on page 294. It Gadal, Vi Kadash, Shmei Rabbah, V'alma divrach ruotei, v'amlich malchutei, v'chai echon of Yom Echon, v'chai dekol Beit Yisrael, v'agalav izman karif v'imru, Amen. Yehei Shmei Rabbah mevarach leolam olamei almaya, Yitbarach v'ishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh, v'yitadar v'yitalev v'yitalal Shmei dekudesha b'richu, Leila min kol birchata v'shirata, tush b'chata v'nechamata, damiran b'yama v'imru, Amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya, v'chaim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael, v'imru, Amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav, hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael, v'imru, Amen. May the source of peace bestow peace to all who mourn. May we be a source of comfort to all who are bereaved, as we say, Amen.
We close today with the singing of Ein Adir, found on page 328. We rise. Ein Adir Kadonai, ve'ein Baruch kevein Avram, ein Gedolah kaTorah, ve'ein Darshaneh keYisrael, mipiel u'mipiel, yevorach kol Yisrael, mipiel u'mipiel, yevorach kol Yisrael, ein Hador Kadonai, ve'ein Bati kevein Avram, ein Zakah kaTorah, ve'ein Chachameh keYisrael, mipiel u'mipiel, yevorach kol Yisrael, mipiel u'mipiel, yevorach kol Yisrael, ein Tahor Kadonai, ve'ein Yachid kevein Amram, ein Kabira kaTorah, ve'ein Lamdaneh keYisrael, mipiel u'mipiel, yevorach kol Yisrael, mipiel, mipiel, yevorach kol Yisrael, ein Podeh Kadonai, ve'ein Tzadik kevein Amram, ein Kedosha kaTorah, ve'ein Tomechea keYisrael, mipiel u'mipiel, yevorach kol Yisrael, mipiel u'mipiel, yevorach kol Yisrael. Vayehi erev, vayehi boker, yom hashishi. Vayichulu hashamayim ve'haaretz v'chol tzevaam. Vayichal Elohim bayom hashvi melachto asher asa. Vayishbon bayom hashvi mikol melachto asher asa. Vayivarech Elohim et yom hashvi, vayikadesh oto, ki bo shavat mikol melachto, asher bara Elohim la'asot. Baruch ata Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, borei peri hagafen. ata Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'ratza banu b'shabbat kodsho be'ahava uvratzon hinechilanu zikaron lema'aseh bereshit ki hu yom techila lemikrai kodesh zehicher letziat mitzrayim kivanu v'acharta ve'otanu kidashta mikol ha'amim ve'shabbat kodshecha be'ahava uvratzon hinechaltanu baruch atah Adonai mekadesh ha-shabbat. Amen. L'chaim.
Melech haolam, hamotzi lechem minu.
Amen.
May these hours of rest and renewal open our hearts to joy and our minds to truth. May all who struggle find rest on this day. May all who suffer find solace. May all who hurt find healing on this day. May all who despair find purpose. May all who hunger find fulfillment on this day. May this day fulfill its purpose. Amen and Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat shalom.